Hey guys, today's video we are once again talking about Tropical Storm Bret and newly developed Tropical Depression 4, which formed very early this morning at the 5 a.m. advisory. So Tropical Storm Bret, let's start off real quick first, is now a 70-mile-per-hour tropical storm with a central pressure of 999 millibars. It is now a very strong tropical storm, just barely below hurricane status, and it is moving west at 14 miles per hour, continuing to barrel towards the Leeward Islands and Lesser Antilles, and will impact them later tonight into tomorrow. Tropical Depression 4 is at 35 miles per hour and at 1,007 millibars, moving west-northwest at 15 miles per hour. Real quick, touching upon Tropical Depression 4, it looks like it will bypass the Caribbean islands generally to the north and west and remain a generally out-to-sea system. It looks like it will peak at around 60 miles per hour and dissipate as we get towards the middle part of next week. So this system as well looks to be fairly short-lived for the most part, like Bret, because of enhanced shear in this area in the Caribbean and Western Atlantic towards the Bahamas. So this system will become likely Cindy with it very shortly, soon, maybe later today at some point. But looks to remain a tropical storm as its peak, and then eventually will start to weaken and dissipate as we get towards the early to middle part of next week. So let's take a look much closer at Bret. Let's look at its cone forecast. Again, it's going to dissipate in the next couple of days, likely towards later Saturday into the afternoon, evening. But the Lesser Antilles, Leeward Islands are under tropical storm watches, tropical storm warnings, and some of them are even under hurricane watches, because Tropical Storm Bret is just below that hurricane status, so it is producing hurricane force gusts, and it's at a strong tropical storm, so it is producing gusts at hurricane strength. So some of the central islands are under hurricane watch because of that, and along with that, obviously, it is also going to be bringing heavy rain with that. But as it gets into the Caribbean and into the Central Caribbean, it will continue to weaken rapidly, and then will likely dissipate as we get towards later in the day Saturday. And by Sunday, it should be fully dissipated, and may just bring some enhanced rainfall to parts of Central America as a dissipating system and a general wave of tropical moisture. So let's look now at what Bret looks like currently on infrared. You can see the convection of Bret is continuing to blow up, and it generally looks a lot less impressive this morning. But likely as we get later into the day and into this evening, convection will be able to blow up easier and much better. So the system likely will look its best as we get towards later into the afternoon and into tonight. But you can see it is very much has some good breathing room with that convection breathing out towards its west especially. And the central convection around its center is generally staying consistent and blowing up and getting stronger every few hours or so. So this system is definitely continuing to maintain itself well now, and maybe it could reach that minimal hurricane status for a brief period later today or something, but for the most part, most likely, it will stay at that very strong tropical storm status as it impacts the Leeward Islands, Lesser Antilles, and then will start to weaken and dissipate as it gets into the Caribbean after that point. Now, let's look at what Tropical Depression 4 looks like. And Tropical Depression 4 now currently looks like a very nice, small, consolidated system with its convection blowing up generally all around and over the center. The center, though, generally is likely in this area here or so. But the system definitely is getting its act together quite well, and you can see it's breathing very nicely towards its westernmost areas. And as it continues to the west, west-northwest generally, it will likely continue to strengthen itself and get better organized, and likely will become a tropical storm and be named Cindy. That is the next name on the list, as we get likely into later today, and if not, then probably tomorrow is the next likely shot for it to be named and become a tropical storm. But it should likely become a tropical storm by later today. I would bet on that for now. And the general track guidance for this system lines up pretty much perfectly as well with the current National Hurricane Center forecast cone, generally going to continue to the west-northwest and bypass the islands just to their north and west, and remain a generally out-to-sea system, and as well, along with that, it will be a weakening system, especially as it's approaching and bypassing these islands and Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, Northern Leeward Islands to their north and west. It will be a weakening system by that point. So those islands and the northern parts of these islands will likely see at the most more just enhanced moisture, enhanced rainfall from the system. Otherwise, it won't pose too much of a threat beyond that. General models, let's just take a look at the hurricane models for Bret and Tropical Depression 4. First, we'll take a look at the HWRF model for these systems. First, the HWRF model for Bret, you can see it is showing Bret will impact the Leeward Islands very shortly, likely later tonight into very early tomorrow. And then it will move into the Caribbean and start to weaken quite substantially as the wind shear increases, and it will just completely fall apart as we get towards the beginning to middle part of next week. So that is currently what the HWRF model is showing for Bret. Now it is showing, let's see what it's showing for Tropical Depression 4. The new run for Tropical Depression 4 for this system, for this model, is just starting to come in now, it seems. So let's look at the 6Z run from earlier this morning. The 6Z run for the HWRF model for Tropical Depression 4 shows it continuing to the west-northwest and strengthening, and the HWRF model is actually quite bullish, it seems, on the system, having its pressure fall into the 980s and getting even close to 980 millibars, and then as it continues to the north and west, it starts to weaken and starts to dissipate as we get towards that beginning to middle part of next week as well. So likely towards the beginning to middle part, especially towards the very middle part of next week, we should see both of these systems, Bret and Tropical Depression 4, likely Tropical Storm Cindy, in the very near term, start to very much weaken and dissipate by the time we get to the middle part of next week. So let's take a look at what the HMON model, the other hurricane-based model for Bret and Tropical Depression 4, show for the system. So the HMON model for Bret shows the system continuing to the west and generally shows a fairly more realistic solution as it approaches and crosses over the Lesser Antilles, Leeward Islands, and gets into the Caribbean. It shows it as generally its pressure staying steady or so. And then as it gets into the Caribbean, the shear increases, it starts to really dissipate. And by the time we get towards the beginning to middle part of next week, it really looks to be a dissipated system. Now, for Tropical Depression 4, let's take a look at that. And we can see moving forward into the end of this week into the weekend, the HMON model for Tropical Depression 4 shows it really not strengthening all that much and generally being a quite broad system. But I would disagree with this much more. I would say it seems like both of these hurricane models for Tropical Depression 4 are having much harder time figuring out exactly how strong the system will get and how possibly it will look as we get into the weekend, into next week. But it seems like somewhere in the middle of both of these hurricane-based models for this system looks more likely, where it will strengthen, but likely strengthen more towards like a middle to higher end tropical storm, and then start to weaken and dissipate as we get towards the end of this weekend into next week, before it likely will be fully dissipated towards the middle and especially end of next week. Just like Bret. So that is what the models and what each of the systems look like currently, and what each of those hurricane models show these systems doing in the coming days before they likely will dissipate going into next week. Now, the hurricane season overall, we are now up to 4 total depressions and 3 named storms. Or 4 general really 4 general systems and 3 total storms, because we had an unnamed subtropical storm all the way back in January, which the National Hurricane Center a couple months ago went back and decided, yes, it was actually a subtropical storm, but they didn't name it. And then we had Arlene, and now we're at the very beginning of this month, at the very beginning of the hurricane season, around June 1st. And now we have Bret and Tropical Depression 4 that we are currently monitoring. And Bret, you can see, is now at a strong tropical storm, just below that hurricane status. There are tropical storm watches, warnings, and hurricane watches up for the central Leeward Islands, including St. Lucia, Martinique, Dominica, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines. I believe that's how that's pronounced. I'm not sure entirely. And Tropical Depression 4 will be more of an out-to-sea type of system, but will bypass just to the north and west of the very northern Leeward Islands and Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands, heading into later this weekend. And then both systems should be starting to really weaken and especially mostly dissipate as both of these systems get into the beginning and middle part of next week. So yeah, especially once we get towards that point, once we get to the middle part next week, we shall see what the Atlantic has in store by that point. And if the Atlantic seems to be going quiet again, we will just start to upload some videos looking to see what the Atlantic could be doing in the coming weeks, and as we head really into July and everything. And when it looks more likely the Atlantic will start to wake up again and start to produce more tropical cyclones out there. So hopefully you really enjoyed this video, found it informative, helpful, interesting. If you did, please consider liking the video down below, subscribing to the channel for future content like this. If you like this type of content, definitely consider subscribing. And as well, comment down below what you guys think Bret, Tropical Depression 4, their impacts, and what how strong do you think Tropical Depression 4 will get particularly? Let's see and have a more of a discussion on how strong do you think Tropical Depression 4 will become. Do you think it will like Bret just get to tropical storm status and likely peak as a tropical storm, or do you think it has somewhat of a more likelihood of becoming a hurricane than Bret does before it also gets to that point of starting to weaken and dissipate because of the enhanced shear as you get closer to the Caribbean? So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Again, consider liking the video, commenting down below, subscribe for future content like this if you like this type of content, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.